Now, joining us is Lord Christopher Monkton of scienceandpublicpolicy.org, the most documented scientific clearinghouse out there for what's been proven to be absolutely accurate, very conservative, but very accurate. This is much worse than he's even saying, but what he puts is so well documented as conservative about the Earth's been cooling for the last 6-7 years. The warming stopped 17, 18 years ago. They're fixing the documents and the research around it, the buoys, the Weather Service info through the universities to cover that up. He helped get the document at Copenhagen 5 years ago that blew it wide open, that it was a world tax that helped stop it. He released that. He spearheaded. I'm not building him up. It's just you need to know you can be effective as well. The best news site overall is Climate Depot with Mark Moreno. And, of course, DrudgeReport.com and Infowars.com are always carrying their news on a weekly basis. But I wanted to get Lord Monkton on last week. I said, please get him on as soon as you can, when there was just a flotilla of new ClimateGate cover-up information and new statements about let's arrest anybody that doesn't agree that climate change is real and doesn't want to pay carbon taxes. And let's fire professors, or let's remove them. I mean, it's the U.S. and England. It's the new McCarthyism. So I want to cover all the latest authoritarianism by the kleptocratic, self-anointed priesthood of the French Revolution-style Jacobins. I mean, I liken them to them because that's where the modern Illuminati, if you study history, and then the communist movement came out of France and England. This is on record mainline textbooks. Just people hear the term Illuminati, don't even know George Washington wrote letters saying how dangerous it was trying to take over Masonry. You can read his letters, the National Archive, online. And so what we face is a group of just control freak criminals that wanted to overthrow the existing order that certainly had some problems, and that got well-meaning liberals in the Thomas Jefferson vein in France and in the U.S. and England to go along with them. So I'm going back to the original progenitors of this degeneracy. They are not liberals. They coaxed many real liberals and true progressives who wanted to progress scientifically, the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. They wanted to hijack that and create a 9-day work week, a living hell, no more families. Everything you see them build, the nightmare North Koreas, the nightmare Soviet Unions, is a Jacobin hallucination. Now, I know Lord Monkton's a historian and inventor, Margaret Thatcher's top advisor and a member of her cabinet. I know he studied history, so I know he will probably agree with what I just said and then augment it. But these are the little-known facts. And the reason I'm starting this interview right now with the source of this communist disease is so that people understand communism is only a 150-year-old Karl Marx, Engels manifestation of the Jacobins. We'll see if he agrees with me. I would imagine he does because it's history. And then I want to look at their latest criminal activities and their attempt to shut us down. And then the state of the war against human resources and the war on humanity. We're winning the info war, but the enemy has seized all the major institutions. So how do we fight them effectively? Lord Monkton, thank you so much for joining us. Where do you think this evil generates from historically, politically, and do you agree with my analysis going back to the root of it in the last 210 years?
I'm going to go back further than that to early imperial China, Alex, because that was the place where they first began philosophically meditating upon the fundamental divide in politics, which is between, on the one hand, the totalitarians, as we would call them now. They called them in those days the legalists. And on the other, the libertarians, that's what we would call them now, and they called them the Confucians. And so the debate between the legalists and the Confucians has gone on really throughout the history of global government, going all the way back to imperial China, where we're going back thousands of years. And that is and will always be the fundamental divide between those who wish to control everything from the center and those who, like you and me, Alex, reckon that we can trust the people to decide for themselves how their government should be shaped and how it should run. And that's why we support the US Constitution. And we don't support the attempts to undermine it and circumvent it by your current president and his cabinet. And on the question of the climate, which is just the latest manifestation of the totalitarian or legalist faction, they have decided to do something which, as far as I can tell, looking back through history, is unique. They've decided, and I think it's a strategic mistake on the part of the totalitarian left. They've decided to try to politicize science itself. They've decided to adopt a particular scientific viewpoint as party policy, as the party line. Now, this is very strange. Of course, there have been precedents for scientific madnesses being adopted by individual nations, such as Lysenkoism under Stalin, where Lysenko, who was a country agronomist, was elevated to be ludicrously head of the Soviet Academy of Sciences and managed to kill 20 million Soviet citizens over a 20-year period by a succession of failed harvests because of his mad theory that soaking the seeds of the corn in water over the winter rather than planting them to get used to the temperature would give you a better crop, or it gave you failed crop after failed crop. And that was adopted for a time by the Soviets, and of course eventually they realized it was mad and they stopped doing it. Likewise, there was Hitler. You go back to Hitler's Germany, where the first use of centralized, full-scale lying propaganda, soon to be copied by the Soviets and now by the totalitarian left worldwide, was to be introduced. And there, the scientific dopiness that they took on board was eugenicism. Now, both of these have now been proven to be nonsensical. But what's now happened is you've got a global totalitarian governing class realizing for the first time that via international institutions such as the UN and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the World Bank and the all these different centralized organizations, not one of which is elected, they can draw all this together and centralize their power. But they needed a scare story in order to frighten us.
And let's go back, though, just because I threw out the French Revolution, that was really the opposite of what the American Revolution was, in my view. Just because I'm interested in it, what's your take on my statements about the fact that you trace communism back to the French Revolution and this attempt?
Well, it goes back much further than that. It is a very, very old and very, very tired.
No, I know. It even goes back to Plato.
Idea.
Yeah, I mean, Plato even talked about, some of these ideas and debated them back and forth. I understand that, but specifically, what is your take on the French Revolution?
I mean, of course, that, too, is a very fine demonstration of this notion of putting the collective before the individual. And, of course, they didn't believe for a moment in liberty or equality or fraternity. They believed in replacing one governing class, which was relatively competent, with another that wasn't, and which soon collapsed in favor of a sort of brief and flashy attempt at empire, whereupon the whole of Europe ganged up against this nonsense and brought Napoleon down. So it was a pretty dramatic failure, the French Revolution, but they're still terribly proud of it. They ought to be ashamed of it.
And that's why I brought it up, because it failed, and every major tyranny ends up failing. The question is, with all the new high-tech ingredients and more fancy propaganda at the technocrats' hands, what does your gut historically tell you, Lord Monkton, who I know is a scholar and also a journalist? What is your gut? How does your gut tell you this is going to end? How do you see it playing out?
The new dimension here is the fact that this has gone global. The globalization of totalitarian groupthink is an immensely serious problem, because those who love freedom are by instinct independent-minded. You know this from the people you interview. We all think in our own way, we talk in our own way, we don't follow the party line of any party, really. And this gives the left, the legalists, the totalitarians, a permanent political advantage, and an advantage which actively becomes dangerous when government starts to become global. So if we go back only as far as the Jacobins and the French Revolution, and you come forward from there, you see the gradual global dissemination of the idea that we should salute and obey our masters in the governing class. A thing which the aristocrats in Britain never expected or demanded is now expected and demanded by the totalitarian left, and with increasing arrogance. For instance, Professor Lennart Bengtsson, one of the most eminent scientists in the world, a physicist, and he was the head of the Max Planck Institute in Germany, which is Europe's foremost scientific institution. And not so long ago, having safely retired, because he couldn't have dared to do this before he retired in the new and intolerant and unacademically free scientific world, he decided to join the policy of my good friend Nigel Lawson's Global Warming Policy Foundation, which is a think tank in the United Kingdom, the only one devoted to giving people the other side of the story, first on the economics and now also increasingly on the science. And of course, it was an enormous coup for the Global Warming Policy Foundation to have persuaded somebody as eminent as Professor Monkton to join the academic advisory board of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. So he joined it, but within 10 days, he had resigned again. And in his letter of resignation, he said he had been so unmercifully bullied and pilloried and pestered with emails and telephone calls and hate mail chiefly from the United States, from scientists in the United States, that he no longer dared to continue, for the sake of his safety and that of his family, to remain as a member of the board of the institution.
The global warmists are a cult.
They're not just a cult. They are a vicious tyranny, and they're trying to impose a narrow and, as we now know, scientifically nonsensical viewpoint on the world. There has now been, according to one of the satellite data sets, no global warming at all for 17 years and 9 months, a completely flat trend. Absolutely no movement at all, 17 years, 9 months. Now, here's the thing, Alex. In how many newspapers have you seen that fact or anything like it recently reported?
Really nowhere. In fact, every summer they point satellites at the northern and southern hemispheres respectively and say they're melting forever, knowing full well they always shrink in the summer. I mean,
that's right. And you see pictures of water pouring off the glaciers, and they say this is because of global warming. No, it's because it's summertime. Get used to it. It's been happening for billions of years. But that is how absurd it's now become. And the news media, the beef I have with them is not so much that most of them are now in this totalitarian class and in this mindset, but that they will not ever print or reveal any fact, however obviously central to the debate and important to it, if in any way that fact casts doubt upon the party line.
Well, sure, there's a new climate gate, for those that don't know, that just broke in the last few weeks. Tell folks about that. We have new examples of them saying we've got to hide the decline. We've got to, not let this data come out. We can't have this paper published.
Oh, they're doing this all the time. I mean, it's a continuous process. It began years ago when the ClimateGate emails came out. It's worth just recalling what happened then, because somebody at the University of East Anglia who had access to its servers started reading the emails between the various scientists around the world that are whipping up this scare. Professor Phil Jones was right at the center of this small group. It's a very small group of scientists who are running this scare. He is one of them, Michael Mann at the University of Virginia, then at Penn State, various others, Kevin Trenberth in Colorado, Ben Santer at Lawrence Livermore. There's only half a dozen of them, really. These were the people, all of them essentially communist in their political outlook, all of them determined to centralize political and scientific power in their own hands as far as possible.
And as you said, Lord Monkton, they relish their collective power, even though individually they can hardly tie their shoelaces, and I'm serious.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you look at the science they produce, it's shoddy in the extreme, full of holes, and of course none of it has come to pass. And when I, for instance, wrote in 2008 in a scientific paper, published in a scientific journal after peer review, that I reckoned the most likely thing was that a doubling of CO2 concentration might cause around 1 Celsius of global warming, and that if you doubled it again, you'd get another 1 Celsius, and after that, you'd run out of things to make CO2 with, and therefore there wasn't a climate problem. There was fury. Again, this business of them saying we can't have this problem.
Well, they've called for your arrest.
They've done that many times. They've said I should be executed. They haven't just said I should be arrested. They've said I should be executed. Now, this is exactly the kind of language that was used by the French revolutionaries, going back again to the Jacobins. It was used also in the days before Hitler came to power, by the Nazi Party. They were calling for the extermination of their opponents. And this is exactly the kind of language which is yet again being used by the totalitarian left.
Oh, now if you support the Tea Party or anything at colleges, the professors say, we're going to kill you, and they're allowed. That was in the news 2 weeks ago. They literally are threatening people. And I noticed the controlled left is ramping themselves up into a bloodlusting lather now and openly saying no one is allowed to challenge them.
This is exactly what happened in pre-Nazi Germany. But as the Nazis were coming to power, they began to command and organize the organs of public opinion. They dominated them just as the left does now. It was the left then. Remember that although there have been attempts to rebrand Hitler as right-wing, he wasn't. It was the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. These were leftists. They didn't like the communists because they were rival leftists, not because one was right and one was left. They were both leftists. And the Hitlerian movement did exactly as it began, by making increasingly strident demands that its opponents should be rounded up and first imprisoned, then executed, whether with or without trial. They didn't care either way. And people didn't bother to stop them saying this. And that was where the trouble grew. The moment they began to realize that however extreme their rhetoric, however wild their demands that their opponents should be obliterated, they would not be punished. They would not be held to account. Nobody would bat an eyelid.
That's right. That's right. It's not free speech when you say we need to kill our enemies.
Once they realized they could get away with that, they then began implementing what they had been calling for. And the result was 6 million Jews murdered and 100 million people killed in the Second World War. It is extremely dangerous to allow this kind of talk and not to fight back and not to resist it. And the problem I have with today's GOP, with the honourable exception of the Tea Party, is that they are sitting on their large wobbly bottoms and not standing up. And every time this attempt to shut free speech down happens, they are not fighting back. They are not bringing in the Constitution and pointing it at those who are doing this. They are tamely allowing the freedom that built America to be dismantled, not just piece by piece, but now wholesale. The moment you get open calls round the world from the scientific community that anybody who disagrees with them on this subject should be executed, and this is increasingly happening, then, and they are allowed to do this without punishment, then that's when the rot starts. Now, fortunately, in some countries, because of what happened under Hitler, it is now unlawful to call for the execution of those whom you oppose politically. And in Austria, for instance, it is illegal. And in Scotland, where I'm speaking from, it is illegal. And in Austria recently, about this time last year, there was a professor, I won't name him because he eventually backed off. And he published a thing all over the web saying that people who didn't believe that the climate was doomed unless the West was shut down should be executed. He said, no point in trying them, they've just got to be executed. Let's get them out of the way. And of course, there was an outcry, but he went on saying it and trying to justify it until I wrote to him and gave him 24 hours to retract that demand that we should be executed, or I would report him to the Austrian authorities under the hate speech law, and he will be sent to prison for life. And my goodness, you've never had a retraction as quick as the one that came back from him.
Well, that's the thing about the controlled left, is they're such ultra-authoritarian plutocrats, and they just have to be stood up against. We'll be right back with Lord Monkton.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
A chemical spill contaminating the water supply in 9 West Virginia counties.
This year alone, over 300,000 people in West Virginia had their drinking water contaminated.
What are the health effects of having these drugs in our drinking water?
It's forced medical treatment without the consent of residents.
My friends, water filtration is one of the most basic actions you can take to protect you and your family from the harmful toxins and heavy metals in your tap water.
On average, the county says it sprays with the glyphosate at least once a week.
Few filters cut out the glyphosates that is found in water supplies supplies worldwide. Remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, hydrofluorosilicic acid, sodium hexafluorosilicate.
Fluoride, it is in tea, it's in coffee, it's in water, it's in bread, it's in toothpaste.
It is our responsibility to protect our families. The establishment's not going to do it. It's time to take action. It's time to filter our water. Visit InfoWarsStore.com and use promo code WATER to get 10% off their entire family of incredible products. Or call toll-free 888-253-3139. From the water table to our soils to the atmosphere itself, our world is becoming more and more toxic each and every day. But it's not just the air outside that's toxic. Indoor air has been shown to have 2 to 5 times higher concentrations of pollutants than even outdoor air. And most Americans spend 90% of their time inside using toxic chemicals within their homes. There are more than 42 million smokers in the United States. Well over 1,000 types of mold and mildew linked to numerous conditions. And don't forget the fact that 6 million Americans live with pets they're allergic to as well. When I began to research these statistics, it was clear to me it was time to start cleansing my lungs in order to combat the toxic environment that we cannot escape, but that we can fight back against. Made with organic and wild cultivated herbs and manufactured in the USA, the new InfoWars Life Lung Cleanse is here in a convenient spray bottle that can be brought with you throughout any toxic environment. Now available exclusively at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.
I don't know what it is. Ralph just won't pay any attention to me. When he comes home from work, all he ever does is play video games and go to sleep. It's like I don't even exist.
Oh, Betty, that's just awful.
Does this seem familiar? If the answer to this question is yes, then listen carefully. Toxic pesticides, GMO foods and additives, BPA plastics, contaminated water supplies. Many of these toxic additives are deliberately engineered to attack and weaken human masculinity. It's part of the eugenics population control movement. Look it up. If men are more interested in online gaming than they are in their wives, a serious population crisis is soon to follow. Energize the man in your life with Super Male Vitality from InfoWarsLife.com. It's designed to aid the body in ways that help invigorate your natural systems without artificial testosterone, completely free of GMOs, harmful additives, gluten, and is made right here in the USA. Get your Super Male Vitality right now at InfoWarsLife.com or call 1-888-253-3139.
Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
It's been banned all over the country. Colleges are saying it's racist if you have a fiesta party at your fraternity with Mexican food. Toga parties are next. They're saying no one can dress up in Halloween costumes of geisha girls, cowboys, or Indians. This is the total control of reducing the language and making everything a faux pas, and it ties into this shutting down information and these people calling themselves liberals when they are the opposite. They're authoritarians. We'll talk to Lord Monkton more about that and talk about the latest scandals and where this fight is going, because we told you this 6 years ago, and now it's happened. They've shut down over 500 different power plants in the country. Coal-powered plants, they're totally clean. Only water vapor and carbon dioxide comes out. And in many areas, power prices have doubled. On average, they're up over 30%. And it's bankrupting the country. China gets 3 a week. We get more than 3 a week shut down. Now they want to shut down more than 1,000 more. Do the math. It's incredible. It's bringing us to our knees. We're going to break down Agenda 21 with Lord Monkton in a moment. Speaking of Agenda 21, we sell Rosa Corey's book. By the way, she's a liberal and Democrat out in California that woke up to this and was a city, county planner, zoning person, and thought this is incredible. She wrote her book. It's a short book. It's available at InfoWarsStore.com. And it's great to give to friends and family that aren't awake, to county commissioners, city council people. It's just one of hundreds of books we carry at InfoWarsStore.com. The books, the films, the liberty-promoting pro-gun and more apparel, Made in America. Made-in-1776.com takes you right to the subsection of InfoWarsStore.com where you can find all the Made in America paraphernalia, golf shirts, you name it. And your purchase of these fine products supports our endeavor. They are war bonds in the info war against the globalists, and we're having a major effect. So many times it's InfoWars and a constellation of other liberty media worldwide that is holding the line and pushing back. UKIP's being demonized and saying, you know, they're racist. We ought to shut them down in England because it's the fastest growing party in England and now in Europe. Kind of Ron Paul-esque, just libertarian. This is happening. And, of course, Lord Monkton is one of the founders of UKIP. So it's so important to support real independent media, even if you don't totally agree with it, if it's basically pro-liberty. Because what Lord Monkton said is so key, and I want him to elaborate on this because it's so important. And I don't want it to get lost in translation or kind of fall into the cracks. He said collectivists have a leg up, not individually. Individually, they're failures. And they've got university studies out of Canada that they're 6 times more likely to steal. Their families don't last. These are terrible people. They're weak people. So they seek power in a gang. They seek power in a cult. They seek power in a combine. They seek power in a swarm like locust. And individualist, we all have different views on the world, even if we may agree on like 90%. We have different perspectives. We're our own people. And so we're not joiners. And we don't tend to, you know, we tend to give charity-wise more than anybody else, conservatives, libertarians, those statistics are worldwide. But we don't unify that often because we are individualists, as you just said. So it's so important to buy the products, to promote the radio shows, the news websites that the FCC came out last week, the FCC chairman, and said, no, this will censor the Drudge Report and other libertarian conservative sites. The Republican leadership wants the real Tea Party shut down with the Democrats. They're the corrupt ruling class that's not free market. And they're branding, if you're pro-gun or anti-Obamacare, that's a total scam, that you're racist. Senator Rockefeller, I played the clip earlier in the hour. We'll play it again. This is what's happening. And these are real authoritarians. They need to be called out for it. They're very dangerous. So again, go to InfoWarsStore.com. We don't get taxpayer money like MSNBC or NPR. We are supported by viewers like you who support our sponsors, like MyPatriotSupply.com/Alex. Best storable foods out there, last 20 years, non-GMO, great customer service. MyPatriotSupply.com/Alex, 866-229-0927. Support our sponsors. Support our local AM and FM affiliates. Go to InfoWarsLife.com. We've developed the nascent iodine that's so good for the glands and helps protect the thyroid from types of radioactive isotopes. People are so, on average, deficient in this. It's done wonders for me and my health. We've got the Super Male Vitality, 8 concentrated herbs that give me such vitality, libido, you name it. You've heard the rave reviews from listeners. Try it. All you've done is support the show, and then you'll be blown away by how powerful it is, or you'll be the first bad review we've gotten. Lung cleanse, all of it. InfoWarsLife.com. Check it out today or call toll-free 888-253-3139. But Lord Monkton, I want you to recap and expand on what you just said, because it was Benjamin Franklin that said we all hang together or hang separate. That's why I don't infight with libertarians or paleo-conservatives or constitutionalist, Confucius, Confucian-type liberty lovers, because I do realize the collectivists crave power and crave destroying individuals. Why do you think that the collectivists, the authoritarians, have such a vitriolic hatred of families, of male masculinity, of independent beauty and freedom and wealth? It's just so alien to those of us. I'm not putting us on a pedestal. I'm just saying who I am, who you are. I crave liberty. I crave the animating contest of competition. I crave diversity and real dynamic human spirit. And I would be embarrassed to use tactics against my competition to try to shut them down. But in this authoritarian world now, it's more than just liberalism, fake liberalism. It's a craven, wicked desire to just cheat and steal. And people think being dishonorable now is a way to get ahead. What do you call this? Just societal rot that we're facing?
This has happened time and again throughout history. And it always ends in the same way. It ends because eventually the totalitarians become so arrogant and so cruel to their fellow men that their fellow men who previously hadn't been able to stand together and unite finally do so and stand up against them. And in fact, going back to your example of what happened in the decades following the French Revolution, when eventually Napoleon emerged as the dictator of France, and then went around doing bilateral country-to-country deals between him and them to lock countries in where he wanted them, then he would invade them. And then they couldn't do anything back because they'd already signed a treaty with him. Eventually, after enough countries had thus been gobbled up by Napoleon, they banded together and stood together against him. And even if the Battle of Waterloo had not been the moment at which he was finally defeated, he had already by then been politically defeated because a grand alliance against him had been formed. And much the same happened really before the Second World War, where countries like Britain refused to get into alliances with other countries against Hitler, because they didn't want another war. Well, of course, nobody wants another war, but the fact was, if they didn't have one, Hitler was going to dominate Europe by exactly the same techniques of a combination of adroit diplomacy and brute force and will that Napoleon had previously used. And Hitler modelled himself very much on Napoleon. And so they did it then, and eventually Hitler pushed it too far, and the world ganged up against him, and he was stopped. Now, the difficulty we now face, Alex, is, as I was saying earlier, a unique situation in which totalitarianism or groupthink has gone global. And this globalization of groupthink is an extremely difficult thing to deal with because, to a greater or lesser degree, every country, even in the once freedom-loving Western world, is now part of this. And the entire bureaucratic and governing class knows that it's more than its job is worth to dare to speak out against it. I'm going to give you an example from the University of Delaware, where a communist front group called Greenpeace, which pretends to be an environmental organization, but in fact was taken over by communists, 30 or 40 years ago now, and has been run as a front group.
And by the way, their founder is the one that blew the whistle on that and released the documents. That's a fact.
Patrick Moore, who has talked to me about it, and likewise is another founder, the late Eric Ellington, whom I knew well. And when I first mentioned on your show some years ago that Eric Ellington, one of the founders of Greenpeace, had said that this had become taken over by the communists, the communists were very angry, and they then got in touch with me to say, well, what evidence do you have that there was anybody called Eric Ellington? And I said, well, his brother is still alive and living in Scotland, where he used to live. Why don't you get in touch with him? So they went quiet after that once they realised there was an Eric Ellington. He was a landscape photographer. He lived partly in Scotland, partly in Jersey. And he said to me very plainly, and he was not a political man, he said, look, we founded the organisation to be a genuine environmental organisation. That was our intention. Patrick Moore says the same. But, he said, then the communists suddenly took it over, and because we weren't political, we didn't know how to stop them. And within a few years, all of us who had founded it had left, not because we didn't believe we needed a cleaner and safer environment, but because we didn't believe Greenpeace any longer had anything to do with that. Now, this organisation wrote to the University of Delaware. It's doing this all the time. And it made an extremely intrusive and elaborate freedom of information request against Professor David Legates, who happens to be a co-author of mine on a recent scientific paper and a bit of a friend. And they began saying, this was 4 years ago now, that they wanted information in 60 different categories about his work on climate change. Now, under the law in the state of Delaware, the first state of the Union, as you know, one of the smallest, and unfortunately controlled largely by the left, Joe Biden's son at the moment is the Attorney General there. They have a freedom of information law, and this was exploited by Greenpeace. And they said, we want information about all this to do with Professor Legates. Now, Professor Legates is not paid by the state of Delaware. He's paid independently by the university, which is itself subsidized separately by the state of Delaware, but his salary is not paid from what comes from the state of Delaware, or rather it wasn't. But then, once this freedom of information request came along, only then did the university tell him that for some years it had been allocating part of the funds from the from the state of Delaware towards his salary, and that therefore, and only for that reason, he was subject to the Freedom of Information law and had to turn over not only all the paperwork that the law required him to, but all his personal paperwork, or anything to do with the climate that was on his personal computer, his personal work, even if it had nothing to do with state funding. He was still to hand it over.
That is an unprecedented level of invasion of privacy. You know,
and of academic freedom. And the university went on and on and on at it. And there's a really nasty piece of work there called White, Lawrence White. He is the general counsel for the university. He was at Georgetown before. He's been the rounds, and everywhere that he's been, he seems to have moved on rather quickly, shall we say. I won't put it any stronger than that. Anyway, here he is at the University of Delaware, quite a come down from Georgetown. And this unspeakable White says to Lee Gates, you either produce all this documentation, whether or not the law requires it, whether or not it forms part of Greenpeace's request, or you will have infringed a request by a senior officer of the university and you'll be punished for it. He was threatened that if he didn't produce documents which he had no duty under any law to produce, he would be punished by the university.
So just more bullying. I want to shift gears currently into their latest power grabs, because politically they've been exposed. Again, they don't care about any of the real environmental issues. It's just all carbon taxes. They're all making money off it, from Pachari and the UN, moving power plants from England and steel mills in England to India. You've got Al Gore making money off of it. All of this, Obama making money off of it. But they're still just moving forward. Give us the latest on that.
Right. Let me first of all just wrap that up very quickly. I was just about at the end of it there. And I have therefore intervened in this matter of the university. And I have made my own Freedom of Information request saying I want all the paperwork from the unspeakable White about his handling of the affair of Professor Lee Gates and the request from Greenpeace. And so far, the university, including White, wrote to me and he said, I'm not going to give you any information. And so he is now in very big trouble with the law, because the next thing will happen, we'll go to court and we'll drag the unspeakable White into court and make him explain himself and put him in the witness box. And question after question after question, the man will be broken by the end of this process if he's behaved as I'm told he's behaved. And
so the issue is they're going after stuff that you're not allowed to get under FOIA, but then he's not following a FOIA himself.
No, that's right. Absolutely. The double standard is palpable, but they're quite shameless about this. They don't care. They'll justify things by the law if it suits them, and if the law doesn't suit them, they won't comply with it themselves. That's how they are, these people. But the point is that we are now beginning to fight back. Every time they try this on one of my colleagues, we fight back. We're also fighting back against anyone who now produces an open and obvious lie in a scientific paper. And I'm going after at the moment some researchers at the University of Queensland who tried to say that 97% of all scientists in 11,944 papers they reviewed since 1991 had said that most of the warming of recent decades was caused by us, when their own data file that they had themselves marked up showed only 64 papers out of 11,944, 0.5%.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the hoax that polar bears can't swim and penguins are all dying and that the Earth's all dying. I mean, it's just...
What they're now doing is, if you can catch them out in an actual straight lie, then you've got them because it's fraud. And so what we're doing to these people who have committed fraud, here and elsewhere, is we're going after them now with prosecutions. And you see, in Britain, where in some respects, although we're an unconsidered satrapy of the European tyranny by Clark, we still have one or two freedoms the European tyranny has.
I was about to say, by the way, you're not just tooting your horn here. You were able to get Al Gore's movie pulled out of most schools because of all the lies in it. You forced them to...
That, we made the Department of Education circulate I think it was 70 pages of corrective guidance before that film could be shown in any school. So there was a huge victory. Al Gore has never really recovered from it because he was shown to have been essentially a political charlatan who knew nothing about the climate.
Wait a minute. You mean he didn't invent the internet?
Well, who can say, but I doubt it very much. Certainly he was wrong about the climate.
No, I'm being sarcastic. The internet was invented in the 70s.
Of course, he's now regarded as a bit of a joke. Point is, though, that we're now fighting back against these lies, and the way to do it is to go against the individual liars, the individual crooks, the individual people like the unspeakable White, the so-called General Counsel of the University of Delaware, who has quite improperly abused his power and abused his position to try to order a tenured member of the faculty at his university to produce documents in gross interference with his academic freedom when there was no law that empowered him so to demand.
All right, we're going to stay there, Lord Monkton. I want to come back and get into their latest power grabs, though. We've talked about stuff they've been doing, how we're fighting back, but I want to know what their latest schemes are. Warn us coming up.
Hello, this is Steve Schenk. Why do police go undercover and why do countries send out spies? Simple. If you can guess from intelligence what the other guy is doing, you have the battle won before it starts. Let's see what intelligence we have about your food situation. We're having the worst disasters ever. Storms, earthquakes, floods, and terrible drought. Half our population needs food stamps and other subsidies to afford their food now. Prices have just hit their all-time high, with more terrible cost coming. Your food and now your water are being sold to other starving countries. Still, 1/3 of our corn goes to expensive gas instead of feeding livestock and people. What few dollars you have, China expects to devalue to uselessness. If it's possible to get the most of the best food and freeze the availability and cost before it disappears and is unavailable, you don't dare miss the opportunity. Go to myfarminabox.com or call 855-918-3663. That's myfarminabox.com or 855-918-3663.
A 30-day GMO-free emergency food supply for only $99 at 30dayfoodsupply.com. You can purchase Oregon Trail Foods' 1-month supply of high-quality, nutritious, and healthy emergency meals. For less than $100, these vegetarian meals are naturally high in fiber, carbs, and protein, and they're packed with oxygen absorbers in Mylar pouches. They're completely free of any artificial flavors and colorings, have a 20-year shelf life, and take up to 70% less space than number 10 cans. They even offer a gluten-free option. Oregon Trail Foods and 30dayfoodsupply.com keep prices low by buying directly from the producers in Oregon and then passing the savings to you. Purchase a 30-day, 90-serving emergency food supply for only $99 this month, and $10 ships your entire order. Visit the website at 30dayfoodsupply.com or call 541-229-0010. That's 30dayfoodsupply.com, where they make preparedness affordable. 30dayfoodsupply.com.
Warnings of an American collapse hit us nearly every day. Gear up while you still can with Infidel body armor. Don't spend between $500 and $600. Infidel is available for just $374.99 with free shipping within the U.S. Made in America and legal in all 50 states. Resist tyranny with Infidel body armor. Buy yours today at InfidelBodyArmor.com. Spelled INFIDEL bodyarmor.com. Infidel body armor. Just won't quit.
Harvest Right is the world's first in-home freeze dryer. Freeze dry your own fruits, vegetables, meats, and full meals. With Harvest Right, you can prepare foods that last 25 years, preserving its freshness, nutrition, color, and taste. All your food can be freeze-dried. So don't throw away your leftovers. Freeze-dry them with this incredible in-home money-saving freeze dryer. Go to harvestright.com to see how the Harvest Right freeze dryer works. That's harvestright.com.
Waging war on corruption. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
I want people to understand something. I first got on the radio in 1996, and I was just like a mainline libertarian. And all these veterans, government people, you name it, engineers, were educating me because I was on the radio, and nobody else had a show like this in Central Texas. Now it's been syndicated, of course, since 1997, and then has expanded greatly. But the engineers would bring me the documents, the farmers and ranchers who were having their ranches taken in eminent domain for pennies on the dollar, and then the enviro Nazis that would do it would turn around, 5 years later and turn it into condos and mansions and sell 3 acres for $1 million or $2 million. Some cases, half an acre for $3 million on the Colorado River. I watched them take more than 50,000 acres. And I mean, I would come out from the radio studio and there'd be all these people down there want me to come to their ranches and see what was being taken. I would go cover it. And it was like a James Bond movie, some of the stuff, the harassment I would get, the death threats. We stopped some of it because it's so corrupt, you barely stand up, it falls. I want to hold Lord Monkton 5 minutes to the next hour so he can finish up his statements. I'm just telling this story now that I then went with Mike Hansen. We've got the footage somewhere. We aired it on, back then I had Access TV show in like 97. They had former Dallas Cowboys. They had the head of Bank of America. They had people from the Clinton administration there. When we got into the Smart Growth Conference, I interviewed Michael Dell. And they would laugh at me when my cameras were off and go, of course we know it's a land grab, and would laugh at me. They weren't even liberals or communists. So there's also a component of this of land grabbers and controllers. It's just criminality is the only way to describe it. Lord Monkton, you know, I tell that story because I don't think people realize under Agenda 21, it's a total overthrow. It's a return to feudalism, but it's beyond that. What do you call these people or this system? They're beyond authoritarians. They're really like authoritarians meet con artists. How would you?
What they are is thieves. It's a brilliant scam because what they do is they set up this whole environmental thing about how we have to save the planet. It's preached now in every school as though it was some kind of new religion. And then they go around, they say, right, we want to exercise eminent domain over a nice ranch in an attractive area so that we can save the lesser spotted three-toed warbler or something.
No, it's a warbler in Austin. No, it's a warbler. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's right. They'll leave it then for a few years, fallow, and then they'll sell it off. And because they'll just leave enough time so that people have forgotten how it was they came by that land and why they came by it, they sell it off, up go the condos, and they trouser millions, I mean tens of millions, on each ranch, if they're clever about it, in profit. And this goes, and then, of course, a lot of that money goes into the Democrat political party. And, of course, that is why the Democrats and the left generally have taken up this supposed global warming cause. It is because the major funders of their opponents politically were, of course, the fossil fuel companies, the coal companies, the electricity companies. They were all big donors once upon a time to the Republican Party. And so what the left have been doing for many, many years, apart from enriching themselves...
They're shaking the oil companies down because they give more to the left now than the right.
That is exactly the thing. They've terrorized the...
They buy protection money. They buy protection.
By saying, yes, exactly that. By saying, if you don't do things the way we want, we'll shut you down because of global warming. Now, there is no basis for shutting anybody down because of global warming. But if you've got every school kid being trained up by his teachers day after day in all this garbage, of course, eventually people are going to end up...
Sir, do 5 more minutes with us on solutions. Just stay there, please.
This is GCN, the Genesis Communications Radio Network.
General, what do you think about the FBI saying that there was a terror alert on Monday about a potential Fort Hood situation?
The police are shoving people, shoving Alex, shoving the crowd.
Here we go, folks. I'm being assaulted.
Whether it's the radio show, the news websites, documentary films, or the nightly news, InfoWars is the tip of the spear.
Is this another false flag stage attack to take our civil liberties and promote homeland security while sticking the hands down on the pants on the streets?
It's up to us to set brush fires in the minds of men and women everywhere. And that's what PrisonPlanet.tv is designed to do.
You watch, the Assad regime is going to be blamed or accused of using chemical weapons against the so-called rebels.
What we see now is a war against reality. It's a war against the truth.
It's more vital than ever that supporters of freedom become members of PrisonPlanet.tv and share their membership with up to 11 friends and family. Visit InfoWarsNews.com today. Become a member, share your membership, and help take the InfoWar to the next level.
Waging war on corruption. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
All right, final segment with Lord Monkton. We'll give you his website here in a moment. You've got the floor, sir, in the 5 minutes we have. Thanks for staying over. I want any other attacks they're involved in we should know about, their latest scams, and then any other solutions. Lord Monkton.
Right. First thing is we're now going to fight back. We're going to fight back in an organized way. We're going to make absolutely sure that these people know that if they are ever dishonest in what they do, we will have them prosecuted for it. And in the United Kingdom, we still have the freedom to mount a private prosecution even when the corrupt institutions of the state refuse to do so. I'm actually quietly involved in a case at the moment, and because I'm involved in it, I'm not going to give too many details, except to say that it involves a researcher at a university who contributed to a scientific paper whose results he flagrantly misrepresented in a manner where he could not but have realized he was misrepresenting it. It was deliberate. He deliberately misrepresented those results with the intention of maintaining the enormous funding that particular university gets for its work on climate change, and of impoverishing those of us who have to pay the massive extra money for energy bills that you were talking about earlier. Now that, under the British definition of the fraud law, which has been changed several times recently, it used to be a common law definition, but now it's a statutory definition, is a fraud in two directions. First of all, it's a fraud because the guy has made up scientific results and then misstated them. And then it's a fraud because not only has he made that misrepresentation, so it's fraud by misrepresentation.
He's getting money.
But it's also fraud. Well, he himself probably isn't making any more money by perpetrating the fraud than he would otherwise. The point is he's causing losses to taxpayers. And under the British definition, if you cause a loss to somebody else, even if you don't expect to benefit from it yourself, that is still a fraud. And so it's a fraud also by abuse of public trust. Scientists are paid a lot of money to present their results fairly. That doesn't mean they're always going to get things right. But it does mean that if they get a result, they present that result accurately, and they do not present...
People in the professional class are held to a higher standard.
And they are indeed. Under the new law, that is the case. Now, the first step I have taken is to give the university the chance, I'm not going to name it, the chance to sort its act out. And in the end, it worked its way all the way up to the Vice-Chancellor, who refused to take action. He is now in the frame for fraud, as is his university, as is the researcher who caused the trouble in the first place, as are the 3 professors who were involved in hearing the misconduct case and finding in favor of the student who was concerned when the evidence against that person was overwhelming. All of them are now facing jail for fraud.
So you're saying the way to go after him is get on the offense. I agree. And the 1 minute we've got left.
Absolutely that. And so the paperwork has gone to the Serious Fraud Office. It's looking at it at the moment. My legal advisors who are handling this for me have said that the likelihood is that they won't want to deal with it because it doesn't fit into their usual way of doing things, nor will the local police in the county concerned, which again I won't name. But the moment they have actually said no to us, I am then free, as you are not in the United States, to walk into any court in England and Wales, any magistrate, and say, here's the evidence. I say that a crime has been committed. I have tried to get the public authorities to do something about it, and they won't. Please will you, exercising your powers under Section 1 of the Justice and the Peace Act 1361, order them to investigate, or, in the alternative, allow me to prosecute. And then I can prosecute directly myself. And that's what I'm now going to do. So plain and so appalling a lie has been told, so catastrophic an effect as it had on politics. Our own ministers are citing this paper and as part of the reason why they're inflicting ever higher taxes on us as a result.
I'll tell you what, we got to go to break again. Come back and finish it. This is important. This is Alex Jones for InfoWarsLife.com. The latest in preparedness is now here. An electrically stabilized colloidal silver solution that can be added to both your home cabinet and preparedness pack alike. Concentrated to 30 parts per million in what has been dubbed the survival silver solution. The new InfoWars Life Silver Bullet Colloidal Silver is the answer for you and your family. And it's entirely free of toxic artificial additives that are loaded into many products. The InfoWars Life Silver Bullet Silver is so powerful that it is concentrated into a 2-ounce bottle and is not recommended for extended continual use. This is not a low-grade formula. We are working with one of the top laboratory manufacturers in the United States to bring you the best form of colloidal silver using electrical processes within a base of deionized water for your preparedness storage or your home kitchen. Purchase your bottle of InfoWarsLife.com Silver Bullet Colloidal Silver today and find other amazing supplements at InfoWarsLife.com.
A chemical spill contaminating the water supply in 9 West Virginia counties.
This year alone, over 300,000 people in West Virginia had their drinking water contaminated.
What are the health effects of having these drugs in our drinking water?
It's forced medical treatment without the consent of residents.
My friends, water filtration is one of the most basic actions you can take to protect you and your family from the harmful toxins and heavy metals in your tap water.
On average, the county says it sprays with the glyphosate at least once a week.
Few filters cut out the glyphosates that is found in water supplies worldwide. Remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, hydrofluorosilicic acid, sodium hexafluorosilicate.
Fluoride, it is in tea, it's in coffee, it's in water, it's in bread, it's in toothpaste.
It is our responsibility to protect our families. The establishment's not going to do it. It's time to take action. It's time to filter our water. Visit InfoWarsStore.com and use promo code WATER to get 10% off their entire family of incredible products. Or call toll-free 888-253-3139. Hi, folks. Alex Jones here with some important information. I want to tell you about Matt Redhawk and his team of patriots over at My Patriot Supply. Several years ago, Matt was sitting in his 2-bedroom apartment, frustrated with the direction this country was headed and the charlatans willing to sell us out for a quick buck. Deciding to take action, a company run by patriots for patriots was born. My Patriot Supply has never taken a loan or accepted outside funding. They now operate 2 distribution facilities and employ over 50 hardworking American men and women. It is rare to find companies who practice what they preach. And that's why I stock my pantry with high-quality storable foods from My Patriot Supply. Go to mypatriotsupply.com/Alex today for special offers on emergency food storage or call their preparedness specialist at 866-229-0927. That's 866-229-0927. Do business with someone who shares your values. mypatriotsupply.com/Alex.
We want your soul.
Defending the Republic from enemies, foreign and domestic. It's Alex Jones.
Tell us your habits, your facts, your fears. Give us your address, your shoe size, your years.
All right, I'm going to go over some of the latest geopolitical news, economic news. When Lord Monkton leaves us in about 5 minutes. He's really on the offense right now, just like happened with ClimateGate and those documents coming out. There's new ones coming out all the time now where they're major universities getting caught organizing fraud. They know the Earth's not been warming for 17 years. A lot of data shows it's been cooling the last few years. But regardless, folks, I don't romanticize the oil companies. I don't romanticize any of this. Most of the big oil companies like BP and Dutch Roll Shell, I see them funding all the environmental ads. So they basically are working with this. This has been the decided program. I get zero money from any corporation or petrol group, and any time I talk about our coal power plants being shut down, you must work for them. Well, actually, coal is generally diametrically opposed to oil because coal's even cheaper than oil. Our power prices are exploding. Same thing in England. Lord Monkton, I know you want to finish up with how you're prosecuting these people, and you've done a lot of that in the past and made them stop showing Al Gore's movie because it was proven fraud and all the rest of it. And I agree that's a key way to go after him. But joining us in these last few minutes, finish up with that. But I want to ask you, the larger issue of, I mean, just for the general public, why does the establishment want to bankrupt the West? Why are they moving everything to China and India? Nothing against China and India, but I mean, they won't even have a market to sell to soon at the level of economic downturn. I mean, I go to the mall. It used to be totally full just 3 or 4 years ago. It's empty. I go to movies. They're empty. Used to be full. I go to most restaurants I know have been closing. Austin is a boom city, the #1 boom city in the United States. And if it's not a trendy area or where government people are at, or where some of the nouveau riche live, it's stalling out. Most of my family that were middle class across the border having trouble. I mean, I can see the country becoming poor. I can see these policies directly shutting us down. Why does the establishment want to do it? I mean, I know about Cloward and Piven, and then I want you to...
What happened is, worldwide, the establishment in the West is looking towards global institutions of government. And everyone who now wants to get into politics is playing to become president of the European Union, president of the UN, general secretary of the UN. They want to be on the world stage now. This is it's this global aspect which I keep referring to. They don't care how many people they tread on, how many people they make bankrupt, how many people's ranches they take over and build condos on. They don't care as long as they take charge globally. It's the same with our prime ministers now. They all, the moment they stop being prime minister here, they queue up to get jobs in the European Union or the UN. That's where the real ambition now is. And because these institutions at global level are not elected by anyone, they are all totalitarian institutions by nature. Because it's only if you have an injection of democracy into a system that you have any hope of getting anything recognizable as freedom, except by sheer luck. And because we have not yet made sure that the international institutions that represent us are elected, these totalitarian institutions are increasingly taking real power from countries where you still elect your governments, as you do, for instance, in the United States. We don't in Britain anymore. We have elections, but they're for mere clerks. We don't elect the people who govern us. Those are the unelected bureaucrats of the European dictatorship. But you still have elections. But it doesn't matter who you elect. What Obama has been doing is going around signing foreign treaties, because under your constitution, he worked out that the Constitution is an obstacle to him, and the way around it was in the Constitution itself. If he signs a foreign treaty, that doesn't just bind this Congress. Even if he's voted out of office and nobody wants that particular provision anymore, once it's in an international treaty, often made with just one other left-wing country doing the same thing, then that becomes part of the permanent international law, and you don't have the power unilaterally, even if you all vote for it, to repudiate that treaty. So that's what he's doing. And increasingly, this battle is going to have to be fought at the international level. And there are two ways one can do this. One can try oneself to take over these institutions of totalitarianism, but they won't let anyone like you or me anywhere near it. You have to subscribe to this culture of corruption in order to get away with it. What we're going to have to do, Alex, it's very ambitious, I'm just beginning to work it out now with my friend, is to establish parallel, independent, democratically elected institutions, a new United Nations that is elected, a new World Bank that is elected, so that no longer will these old totalitarian institutions have any money, any power, any standing, or any right to interfere in how we live. We're going to need a new constitution of freedom internationally, not just in individual states. It's desirable there too, but internationally. We now have to club together in a way that, as we were saying at the outset, we do not, as individualists, naturally do. And so I'm proposing to found an institute. It's just going to be called Freedom. And it's going to be open to anyone in the world who subscribes to democratic principles of government, so that the power resides firmly, as it does in the United States Constitution, at least in theory, in the hands not of the government, but of the people, who can make and unmake governments at will. That's what we're going to have to do, and we're going to have to do it quite fast, because freedom is dying very rapidly. Your Republican Party is not fighting for it. The Conservative Party here has abandoned it, which is why today the United Kingdom Independence Party is about to become the largest British party in the European Parliament. And it's going to be such a stunning result for UKIP that the totalitarians will be rocked back on their heels, because we have been quietly building for years to make absolutely sure that at least on our continent, freedom does not die.
No, I know, and I follow the news as your party that you founded 20-something years ago or whatever it was explodes in popularity and is duplicated across Europe. They're openly calling for shutting you down, saying you're racist when you're the opposite of it. I mean, saying UKIP is, and just really using classic Marxist tactics. And that's what I wanted to ask you, Lord Monkton, is that clearly, I mean, I saw last year where the French socialists, to a man almost, and a woman, are exempt from the EU taxes, as the EU bureaucrats are. I mean, total discrimination, classical tyranny. And that then they almost all have Swiss bank accounts and don't pay their national taxes, but have raised taxes on the nouveau riche and wealthy in France to 101% to bankrupt their competition. I mean, this is a lawless hyper-tyranny. And as Nigel Farage, your colleague and leader of the party, becomes more and more popular, to see them so threatened, it shows that they can be defeated. But as you said, we have to accurately state how radically bad they are. But people in England, people in Europe, people here in the U.S. tend to be more gentlemanly. Conservatives tend to be more friendly, and we don't want to come out and say these are bloodthirsty tyrants, but they are. So how do you up the rhetoric to match the reality is what I'm saying.
Well, what we've done in UKIP, and we've done it very quietly but with increasing success, we have a brilliant leader, Nigel Farage, who is an ordinary working bloke who just decided he wanted his country back. And for years, he got nowhere. He went round all the pubs in the southeast of England, one every night, talking to people saying, we can't let this go on. And they were all horrified at what he was telling them about how this political class was trying to take away all their democratic rights and powers. And they were appalled. And gradually, he built UKIP into an enormous and very successful fighting force. It's about to do very, very well in the European elections, precisely because all the other parties here in Scotland, all the other parties have ganged up against us. And they've said, whatever you do, don't vote UKIP. We're all agreed we don't want UKIP. Of course they are, because they don't want their gravy train to hit the buffers. They don't want it to tip into the gulch. They want to go on being able to prey upon us, to put up their ludicrous wind farms all over the beautiful parts of Scotland, to run everybody out of money with excessive power prices, to make everybody the slaves of a tyranny that they cannot remove and cannot hold to account. And we have simply said, here is what they're actually doing to you. We've described it. And we have used the kind of language that conservatives don't usually use. We've called them tyrants. We've called them communists. We've called them exactly what they are.
That's it. The only way to defeat them, they always say, turn down your rhetoric, you'll be successful. No, that's why we fail. We must go all the way. We must tell the truth.
Of course, one has to be sensible in the way one puts the point across. As I've said to you before, I regard you as being just about on the outer fringe of where one can safely be. Any further, and you're off into outer space. But the thing is, yes, there has to be a certain common sense in how we express ourselves, but we can be a great deal more vigorous than your average limp-wristed panty waist from the GOP National Committee is. We can do a lot more than they are doing. And in UKIP, we're showing...
Well, sure, but let me respond to that. I mean, look, I need to be a radicalizer and go all the way, hit the barbed wire first to shake people out of their days, and then they can come along and find Ron Paul and Rand Paul and Lord Monkton.
Exactly, and you're quite right about that, and I fully understand your place in the spectrum, as it were. But the point is this, Alex. You're doing very good work, and there's no doubt about this. You have a massive audience and a devoted audience. I get correspondence every time I'm on the air with you because people like to hear the Monkton dimension on all this. And they are now waiting for leadership to go to the next stage. They're waiting for what we have done in UKIP to be done not just in individual nations.
And the establishment admits they're worried about an American-style UKIP party. I mean, that's what
Of course they are, and with good reason, because if there were one, it would have much greater chance of success than ever it had here in the UK, because you are instinctive libertarians in the United States. The vast majority of your population are libertarians, not, of course, in the central cities where they're all on government handouts and paid for by Obama, but everybody else, all the working people.
Absolutely. Sir, we're out of time. Scienceandpublicpolicy.org. Thanks for all the time. Keep doing a great job. There he goes from England, Lord Christopher Monkton. I'm Alex Jones of Infowars.com. Stay with us.